The morning started like any other at Clarence's house. Queen Camilla sat in her favorite armchair, reading through the daily newspapers while sipping her Earl Grey tea. The sunlight streamed through the tall windows, casting a warm glow across the elegant sitting room. She had grown accustomed to this peaceful routine since becoming queen consort, finding comfort in these quiet moments before the day's royal duties began. Her personal secretary, Margaret, knocked softly on the door before entering with a silver tray containing the morning correspondence. Among the usual letters and official documents was an envelope bearing the unmistakable seal of Buckingham Palace. The weight of it in Camilla's hands felt different somehow, more significant than the typical royal communications she received daily. As she opened the letter, Camilla noticed the formal letterhead and the serious tone of the opening paragraph. The document was signed by the palace's most senior officials, including the private secretary to His Majesty King Charles III. Her eyes scanned the carefully worded sentences, each phrase becoming more surprising than the last. The contents spoke of traditions, constitutional matters, and decisions that had been made at the highest levels of the monarchy. The letter explained that after extensive consultation with constitutional experts and historical precedent review, certain changes would be implemented regarding royal titles and their usage. Camilla read each word carefully, her tea growing cold as the significance of the message became clear. The document referenced ancient protocols that hadn't been invoked in decades, speaking of ceremonial adjustments that would affect the very foundation of her current position. Margaret waited patiently near the door, sensing the importance of whatever her employer was reading. She had worked for the royal family long enough to recognize when something momentous was occurring. The silence in the room stretched on, broken only by the gentle ticking of the antique clock on the mantelpiece. Camilla's hands trembled slightly as she continued reading. The letter detailed how extensive research had been conducted into historical royal titles and their proper applications. Legal experts had been consulted, along with historians specializing in British monarchy traditions. The conclusion reached by these authorities would reshape her understanding of her own position within the royal hierarchy. The document went on to explain that public announcements would be made in due course, but as the person most directly affected, she was being informed first as a matter of courtesy and respect. The palace had spent months preparing for this moment, ensuring that every detail was properly researched and that all legal requirements were met before making any changes official. Reading further, Camilla discovered that the decision involved more than just her own title. It encompassed a broader review of how royal titles had evolved over time, and whether current usage aligned with historical accuracy. The research had uncovered information that necessitated corrections to ensure the monarchy maintained its constitutional integrity and respected established traditions. The letter emphasized that these changes were not made lightly or without careful consideration. Every aspect had been examined by constitutional lawyers, historians, and senior members of the royal household. The decision represented a return to proper protocol rather than an arbitrary change. Though Camilla understood that the public might not immediately grasp these subtle but important distinctions. As she reached the final paragraphs, Camilla felt her emotions beginning to overwhelm her composed exterior. The formal language of the document couldn't mask the profound impact these changes would have on her daily life and public role. She had worked hard to earn respect in her position, building relationships and establishing herself as a valued member of the royal family. The letter concluded with assurances that the changes were in no way a reflection of her performance or worthiness as a royal family member. Instead, they represented a necessary correction to ensure that all aspects of the monarchy operated according to proper constitutional guidelines. The palace expressed confidence that she would understand the importance of these adjustments and continue to serve with distinction. Margaret noticed that her employer had finished reading and appeared deeply affected by whatever the letter contained. She approached carefully, offering to refill the now cold teacup or provide any assistance that might be needed. Camilla looked up with eyes that showed a mixture of shock, confusion, and growing emotional distress. The implications of what she had read were still sinking in. Years of establishing herself in her role, building public trust, and finding her place within the complex structure of the royal family now faced uncertainty. She understood the importance of constitutional accuracy and traditional protocol, but the personal cost of these changes felt overwhelming in that moment. Camilla set the letter down on the side table with careful precision, as if handling something fragile that might shatter under too much pressure. The morning that had started so peacefully now carried the weight of impending change. She knew that whatever came next would require all of her strength and dignity to navigate successfully. The silence in the room was broken by the distant sound of palace staff going about their daily duties, unaware that history was quietly unfolding in this peaceful sitting room. Margaret remained nearby, ready to offer support or assistance as needed, her loyalty unwavering despite not fully understanding what had transpired. Outside, life continued normally across London. People walked to work, children played in parks, and tourists gathered outside palace gates hoping for a glimpse of royal activity. None of them could have imagined that inside Clarence House, a document bearing official seals was about to change everything they thought they knew about their royal family. Camilla reached for her teacup with slightly unsteady hands, needing something familiar to ground herself in this moment of uncertainty. The Earl Grey had indeed grown cold, but she sipped it anyway, buying herself time to process the full meaning of what she had just learned. The next few hours would require careful thought about how to respond to this unexpected development. The morning sun continued to stream through the windows, unchanged by the momentous news that had just been delivered. But for Queen Camilla, everything felt different now, as if the very foundation of her world had shifted beneath her feet. Hours passed before Camilla felt ready to share the news with anyone. She had spent the time walking through her private gardens, trying to make sense of the letter's contents and their implications. The formal language had been clear enough, but the emotional impact was something she needed to process alone before involving others. When King Charles returned from his morning engagements, he found his wife in the conservatory, staring out at the rose garden they had planted together. Her usual warm greeting was replaced by a subdued acknowledgement of his presence. He immediately sensed that something was wrong, and approached with the gentle concern that had characterized their relationship through many challenges. Camilla handed him the letter without speaking, watching his face carefully as he read through the official document. Charles's expression grew increasingly serious as he absorbed the same information that had shaken his wife hours earlier. When he finished reading, he set the paper down and reached for her hand, understanding immediately why she had been so affected by the morning's correspondence. The couple sat together in contemplative silence, both understanding the magnitude of what the palace had decided. Charles, with his decades of experience in royal protocol, recognized the constitutional reasoning behind the decision. However, he also understood the personal toll it would take on Camilla, who had worked so hard to establish herself in her role and win public acceptance. They discussed the historical precedents mentioned in the letter, examining how similar situations had been handled in the past. Charles explained some of the more complex constitutional points, helping Camilla understand why the palace legal team had reached their conclusions. The decision wasn't arbitrary or personal, but based on centuries-old traditions that still governed royal titles and their proper usage. As they talked, Margaret appeared with a message that the palace had requested a private meeting later that afternoon. Senior officials wanted to discuss the implementation of the changes and how the announcement would be handled publicly. The meeting would include constitutional experts who could explain the legal reasoning in greater detail and answer any questions about the process. Camilla felt a mixture of dread and curiosity about the upcoming meeting. She wanted to understand the full reasoning behind the decision, but she also feared learning more details that might make the situation feel even more overwhelming. Charles assured her that he would attend the meeting as well, providing support and helping to navigate any complex discussions about protocol or procedure. The afternoon meeting took place in one of Buckingham Palace's more formal conference rooms, with several senior officials present to explain their research and recommendations. The lead constitutional expert, a distinguished elderly gentleman named Professor Whitfield, had spent months reviewing historical documents and legal precedents related to royal titles and their proper application. Professor Whitfield explained that their research had uncovered information showing that certain royal titles had evolved over time in ways that didn't strictly adhere to historical protocols. While these changes had been accepted and used for years, maintaining constitutional accuracy required addressing these discrepancies. The monarchy's legitimacy depended on following established traditions and legal frameworks correctly. The discussion revealed that multiple royal titles were being reviewed, not just Camilla's position. The palace was conducting a comprehensive examination of how titles had been used throughout recent decades, comparing current practices with historical precedents. This broader review had identified several areas where corrections were needed to ensure constitutional compliance. Camilla listened carefully as the experts explained the specific historical documents they had consulted and the legal opinions they had sought. The research was thorough, and the conclusions seemed sound from a constitutional perspective. However, the human cost of these academic decisions felt overwhelming to someone who would be directly affected by the changes. The officials assured her that the changes would be implemented gradually and with maximum consideration for all parties involved. Public announcements would be carefully crafted to explain the constitutional reasoning while minimizing any negative implications for individuals affected by the title adjustments. The palace communications team was already working on strategies to present the information clearly and respectfully. During the meeting, Camilla learned that similar reviews had occurred periodically throughout royal history, typically when new research revealed discrepancies between traditional practices and historical accuracy. The monarchy had always adapted to maintain its constitutional integrity, even when such adaptations required difficult adjustments to established routines and expectations. Professor Whitfield presented historical examples of how previous title adjustments had been handled, showing that the monarchy had successfully navigated similar challenges in the past. Each situation had been unique, but the common thread was the institution's commitment to constitutional accuracy over convenience or personal preference. As the meeting progressed, Camilla began to understand the broader context of the decision. The changes weren't targeted at her personally, but represented part of the monarchy's ongoing effort to maintain legitimacy through strict adherence to traditional protocols. This understanding helped somewhat, though the personal impact remained significant. The palace officials emphasized that the changes wouldn't diminish her role or importance within the royal family. Her contributions and service would continue to be valued and recognized, regardless of any adjustments to formal titles or ceremonial positions. The modifications were purely technical corrections, rather than judgments about her worthiness or performance. Charles asked detailed questions about the timeline for implementation and the public announcement strategy. He wanted to ensure that Camilla would have adequate support throughout the transition, and that the public would understand the constitutional reasoning behind the changes. His protective concern for his wife was evident throughout the discussion. By the end of the meeting, Camilla had a clearer understanding of the situation, though her emotions remained complicated. She appreciated the thoroughness of the research and the constitutional importance of accuracy in royal titles. However, the personal cost of adapting to these changes still felt daunting, especially given how hard she had worked to establish her current position. This kind of officials concluded by reiterating their respect for her service and their commitment to managing the transition as smoothly as possible. They would work closely with her staff to ensure that all practical aspects of the changes were handled efficiently and with appropriate sensitivity to the human elements involved. As they prepared to leave the meeting, Camilla felt a mixture of resignation and determination. The constitutional requirements were clear and non-negotiable, but she would face the changes with the dignity and grace that had characterized her approach to royal duties throughout her time in the family. The days following the palace meeting were filled with preparation and planning. Camilla's private secretary worked closely with palace communications specialists to develop strategies for managing the upcoming announcement. Every detail needed careful consideration, from the timing of the public statement to the specific language used to explain the constitutional reasoning behind the changes. Camilla found herself reviewing historical documents that Professor Whitfield had provided, trying to understand the complex evolution of royal titles throughout British history. The research was fascinating from an academic perspective, showing how the monarchy had adapted to changing political and social circumstances over centuries. However, reading about these historical precedents also made her current situation feel even more surreal. The constitutional experts had identified specific documents dating back several centuries that outlined the proper protocols for royal titles. These ancient guidelines had been overlooked or misinterpreted in recent decades, leading to practices that, while widely accepted, didn't strictly adhere to traditional requirements. The current review aimed to correct these discrepancies and restore historical accuracy to royal ceremonial practices. Charles spent considerable time discussing the situation with his mother's former advisors and constitutional experts who had served the monarchy for decades. Their insights helped him understand how similar challenges had been navigated in the past and what lessons could be applied to the current circumstances. The institutional memory of the monarchy provided valuable guidance for managing complex transitions. Meanwhile, media speculation had begun to circulate about unusual activity at the palace. Royal correspondents noticed increased meetings between senior officials and detected subtle changes in scheduling and protocol that suggested something significant was being planned. However, the palace maintained strict confidentiality about the true nature of these preparations. Camilla's daily routine continued much as before, but she found it difficult to focus on her regular duties, knowing that everything might soon change. Public appearances felt strange when she knew that her role and title were about to be redefined according to historical protocols she was still trying to fully understand. The weight of impending change colored every interaction and decision. The palace legal team continued their research, ensuring that every aspect of the title changes complied with both historical precedent and current constitutional requirements. They consulted with parliamentary officials, church authorities, and constitutional scholars to verify that their conclusions were sound and that the implementation process would meet all necessary legal standards. Professor Whitfield provided additional historical context during a private consultation with Camilla and Charles. He explained that the monarchy had faced similar constitutional challenges throughout its history, often requiring adjustments that seemed difficult at the time, but ultimately strengthened the institution's legitimacy and historical continuity. These precedents offered some comfort, though the personal impact remained challenging. The research had revealed that several European monarchies had conducted similar title reviews in recent decades, addressing discrepancies between historical protocols and modern practices. These international examples provided models for how such changes could be implemented respectfully while maintaining public confidence in the institution. The British monarchy could learn from these experiences while adapting the approaches to their specific constitutional requirements. As the announcement date approached, Camilla worked with speechwriters and communication specialists to prepare for the public questions that would inevitably follow. She wanted to be able to explain the constitutional reasoning clearly, while acknowledging the personal challenges involved in adapting to the changes. Finding the right balance between institutional duty and human emotion required careful consideration. The palace released a preliminary statement indicating that an important announcement regarding royal titles would be made soon, based on extensive constitutional research and historical review. This brief communication aimed to prepare the public for significant news while avoiding speculation about the specific nature of the changes. Royal correspondents immediately began investigating possible reasons for such an announcement. Charles arranged for private meetings with senior members of the royal family to inform them about the upcoming changes before the public announcement. These conversations were necessary to ensure family unity and support during what promised to be a challenging transition period. Everyone needed to understand the constitutional reasoning and prepare for potential public reactions. The emotional toll of the situation became more apparent as the announcement date drew closer. Camilla experienced moments of profound sadness about losing aspects of her current role that had become deeply meaningful to her. She had worked hard to earn respect and establish valuable charitable partnerships that might be affected by the title changes. However, she also found strength in understanding the historical importance of maintaining constitutional accuracy. The monarchy's credibility depended on strict adherence to established protocols, even when such adherence required personal sacrifices. Her willingness to accept these changes demonstrated her commitment to the institution's long-term stability and legitimacy. The palace communications team finalized their strategy for explaining the constitutional reasoning to the public in accessible terms. They developed educational materials about the historical research process and the importance of maintaining traditional protocols in modern constitutional monarchy. These resources would help journalists and the public understand the complexity behind what might appear to be simple title changes. Margaret worked tirelessly to reorganize Camilla's schedule and responsibilities in preparation for the transition. Some ceremonial duties might need adjustment, and certain official relationships would require renegotiation based on the new constitutional framework. The practical aspects of implementing the changes were as complex as the emotional challenges involved. As the final preparations were completed, Camilla reflected on her journey within the royal family and the various challenges she had already overcome. This latest obstacle would test her resilience and adaptability once again, but she had learned to face difficult circumstances with dignity and grace. The upcoming changes were daunting but not insurmountable. The night before the planned announcement, Camilla and Charles spent quiet time together in their private sitting room, discussing their hopes and concerns about the next phase of their royal service. They acknowledged the difficulties ahead while reaffirming their commitment to supporting each other and maintaining their dedication to their constitutional duties, regardless of how those duties might be redefined by historical accuracy. The morning of the announcement arrived with unusual activity throughout the royal residences. Palace staff moved with purposeful efficiency, preparing for what they knew would be a significant day in royal history. Camilla woke early, unable to sleep soundly, knowing that her life was about to change in ways she still couldn't fully predict or control. She chose her outfit carefully, selecting a navy blue ensemble that conveyed both dignity and approachability. Every detail mattered on a day when public attention would focus intensely on her reaction to the palace's announcement. She wanted to present herself as composed and understanding of the constitutional necessities, even while processing her own complex emotions about the changes. The official announcement was scheduled for 11 o'clock in the morning, time to reach maximum media coverage across different time zones. Palace Communications had coordinated with major news outlets to ensure accurate reporting of the constitutional reasoning behind the title changes. Educational materials were ready for distribution to help explain the historical research that had prompted this significant decision. At 9:30, Camilla received a final briefing from the Palace Communications team about the announcement's specific language and the expected media response. They reviewed potential questions she might face during public appearances and discussed strategies for explaining the constitutional complexities in terms that ordinary citizens could understand and appreciate. Professor Whitfield joined the briefing to provide last-minute clarification about the historical precedents being followed. His research had been exhaustive, examining documents from royal archives that hadn't been consulted for decades. The constitutional framework he had uncovered was unquestionably authentic, based on traditions that had governed the monarchy for centuries before being gradually overlooked in more recent times. The announcement itself was released simultaneously through multiple official channels, including the palace website, social media accounts, and direct distribution to accredited royal correspondents. The carefully crafted statement explained that extensive constitutional research had revealed discrepancies between current royal title, usage, and historical protocols established centuries earlier. The document outlined how constitutional experts had spent months reviewing ancient royal charters, parliamentary records, and ecclesiastical documents to understand the proper application of various royal titles. Their research had revealed that certain titles currently in use didn't align with the historical precedents that formed the legal foundation of the British monarchy's constitutional framework. Specific to Camilla's situation, the research had shown that the title of Queen Consort, while commonly used and widely accepted, didn't reflect the precise constitutional status outlined in the historical documents that governed royal titles. The proper title, according to these ancient protocols, was simply Queen, but with specific limitations on ceremonial roles that differed from those associated with a queen regnant. The announcement emphasized that these changes represented a return to historical accuracy, rather than arbitrary modifications to established practices. The monarchy's legitimacy depended on strict adherence to constitutional traditions, even when such adherence required adjustments to popular understanding or contemporary convenience. Media reaction was immediate and intense. Royal correspondents who had been tracking the unusual palace activity over recent weeks now understood the significance of their observations. News outlets worldwide picked up the story, with headlines focusing on the constitutional complexities and the personal impact on Camilla herself. International constitutional experts were consulted for commentary, with most agreeing that the British monarchy's commitment to historical accuracy was commendable, even when it required difficult personal adjustments. Similar reviews had occurred in other constitutional monarchies, demonstrating the ongoing importance of maintaining traditional legitimacy in modern democratic societies. Public reaction was mixed and complex. Some citizens appreciated the monarchy's dedication to constitutional accuracy and historical tradition. Others questioned whether such ancient protocols remained relevant in contemporary society. The palace had anticipated this range of responses and prepared educational materials to help explain the reasoning behind the changes. Camilla's first public appearance following the announcement was at a previously scheduled charity event focused on literacy programs for disadvantaged children. She maintained her usual warmth and engagement with the cause, though observers noted a subtle sadness in her demeanor that hadn't been present at recent public events. During the charity visit, she was asked by reporters about her reaction to the title changes. Her response was carefully measured, expressing understanding of the constitutional necessities while acknowledging that adapting to the changes would require time and patience. She emphasized her continued commitment to her charitable work and public service. Regardless of any adjustments to her formal title, the constitutional implications of the changes extended beyond just the title itself. Certain ceremonial roles and official precedences needed adjustment to align with the historical protocols that were being restored. These changes affected everything, from state banquet seating arrangements to the order of signatures on official documents. Palace protocol officers worked intensively to implement all necessary adjustments while minimizing disruption to ongoing royal duties and public engagements. The changes were being introduced gradually, allowing time for adjustment and ensuring that essential royal functions continued without interruption during the transition period. Charles issued a personal statement supporting the constitutional changes while expressing pride in his wife's graceful acceptance of the necessary adjustments. He emphasized that her contributions to the royal family and her service to the nation remained as valuable as ever. Regardless of any modifications to formal titles or ceremonial positions, the international diplomatic community was briefed on the changes to ensure proper protocol during future state visits and official occasions. Foreign dignitaries needed to understand the constitutional reasoning behind the adjustments and the appropriate ways to address members of the British royal family under the restored historical framework. Religious authorities were also consulted, as some of the title changes had implications for church ceremonies and religious protocols involving the royal family. The Archbishop of Canterbury provided historical context about how similar constitutional adjustments had been handled in previous centuries, offering guidance for maintaining both royal and ecclesiastical traditions. As the day progressed, Camilla began to see messages of support from various quarters. Fellow members of European royal families, who had experienced similar constitutional adjustments in their own countries, offered private encouragement and shared their experiences of navigating comparable changes with dignity and grace. The evening concluded with a private family dinner where the immediate implications of the day's announcement could be discussed openly. Charles and Camilla talked through the practical adjustments that would need to be made in coming weeks and months, focusing on maintaining their effectiveness in public service while adapting to the restored constitutional framework. Despite the challenges, Camilla expressed gratitude for the thoroughness of the historical research and the care with which the palace had managed the announcement process. The changes were significant and personally difficult, but they represented the monarchy's commitment to constitutional integrity and historical legitimacy that ultimately strengthened the institution's foundations. The weeks following the announcement brought a whirlwind of adjustments that tested everyone's ability to adapt to the new constitutional framework. Camilla found herself navigating unfamiliar territory as palace staff worked to implement the historical protocols that had been dormant for generations. Every aspect of royal life seemed to require reconsideration and careful adjustment to align with the ancient traditions being restored. The most immediate changes involved ceremonial procedures and official precedents. Camilla discovered that her position in state ceremonies would be different from what she had grown accustomed to, requiring new choreography for events that she had performed confidently for years. Palace protocol officers spent hours explaining the historical reasoning behind each adjustment and helping her understand the ancient traditions that governed these formal occasions. Public engagements required careful preparation as well. The restored constitutional framework affected how she was introduced at official events, how her role was described in official programs, and even the specific language used in speeches and presentations. Every detail needed review to ensure accuracy according to the historical protocols that were being reinstated. Her charitable work, which had always been deeply meaningful to her, faced uncertainty as organizations tried to understand how the title changes might affect their royal patronages and official relationships. Camilla spent considerable time meeting with charity leaders to reassure them that her commitment to their causes remained unchanged, even if the formal framework of her involvement required some adjustments. The emotional impact of these constant adjustments was more challenging than she had anticipated. Each day brought new reminders that her role and identity within the royal family were being redefined according to ancient rules she was still learning to understand. The weight of tradition felt both inspiring and overwhelming as she tried to honor historical precedents while maintaining her effectiveness in modern royal duties. Charles provided unwavering support throughout this difficult transition period. His deeper understanding of royal history and constitutional tradition helped him guide Camilla through the complexities of the restored protocols. Their evening conversations often focused on finding ways to adapt gracefully to the changes while preserving the meaningful aspects of her royal service that had developed over the years. International media coverage continued to focus intensely on the story, with royal correspondents from around the world analyzing every aspect of the constitutional changes and their implications. Camilla found herself under increased scrutiny as observers tried to assess how she was handling the personal challenges of adapting to the restored historical framework. Some media commentary was supportive, praising her dignity and grace in accepting necessary constitutional corrections. Other coverage was more critical, questioning whether such ancient protocols remained relevant in contemporary society and speculating about the personal cost of implementing these historical adjustments. The range of public opinion reflected the complexity of balancing tradition with modernity in constitutional monarchy. Educational initiatives launched by the palace helped explain the historical research process and the importance of constitutional accuracy in maintaining royal legitimacy. Professor Whitfield participated in several public lectures and media interviews, explaining how the ancient documents had been discovered and authenticated, and why adherence to these protocols was essential for the monarchy's constitutional foundation. The changes also affected royal household staff, who needed to learn new protocols and adjust their daily routines to accommodate the restored historical framework. Senior staff members attended special briefing sessions to understand the implications of the constitutional changes for their various responsibilities and areas of expertise. Camilla's personal staff worked particularly hard to help her navigate the transition. Margaret, her trusted secretary, coordinated with palace protocol experts to ensure that every aspect of the changes was implemented correctly while minimizing stress and confusion. The dedication of these staff members provided essential support during a challenging period of adjustment. Despite the difficulties, Camilla began to find aspects of the historical traditions that she could appreciate and embrace. Learning about the ancient protocols connected her to centuries of royal history and helped her understand her place within a continuing constitutional tradition. The restored framework, while challenging, represented a link to the monarchy's deepest historical roots. Public appearances during this period required careful management. Camilla maintained her usual warm engagement with the public while dealing with the internal challenges of adapting to her changing role. Observers noted her resilience and determination to continue serving effectively, despite the personal difficulties involved in the constitutional transition. The restored protocols affected relationships with other members of the royal family as well. Ceremonial precedents and official roles within the family structure required adjustment according to the historical framework being implemented. These changes were managed sensitively, with careful attention to maintaining family harmony while respecting constitutional requirements. Religious ceremonies presented particular challenges, as church protocols also needed adjustment to align with the restored constitutional framework. The Archbishop of Canterbury worked closely with palace officials to ensure that religious observances properly reflected the ancient traditions, being reinstated while remaining meaningful and accessible to contemporary congregations. As autumn approached, Camilla reflected on how much had changed since that morning when she first read the official letter announcing the constitutional review. The initial shock and emotional distress had evolved into a more complex understanding of her role within historical traditions that extended far beyond her personal experience or preferences. The restoration of ancient protocols had revealed the deep, constitutional foundations upon which the modern monarchy rested. While the personal cost of these changes remained significant, Camilla began to appreciate how her adaptation to the historical framework contributed to the institution's legitimacy and constitutional integrity. Her relationship with the public evolved during this transition period as well. Many citizens expressed admiration for her willingness to accept difficult changes in service of constitutional accuracy. Others remained sympathetic to the personal challenges she faced, while adapting to ancient protocols that seemed disconnected from contemporary life. The experience taught Camilla valuable lessons about resilience, duty, and the complex relationship between personal identity and institutional role. She discovered strength she hadn't known she possessed and developed a deeper appreciation for the constitutional traditions that had sustained the monarchy through centuries of social and political change. As the immediate crisis of adjustment began to stabilize into new routines, Camilla looked forward to finding ways to serve effectively within the restored historical framework. The changes had been difficult and emotionally demanding, but they had also connected her more deeply to the ancient traditions that gave meaning and legitimacy to her constitutional role. 6 months after the stunning palace announcement, Camilla stood in the same conservatory where she had first processed the news that would change her life forever. The roses in the garden had bloomed and faded with the seasons, but the woman who tended them had emerged from her ordeal, fundamentally transformed by the experience of adapting to ancient constitutional traditions. The tears that had marked those early days of adjustment had given way to a deeper understanding of her place within the continuing story of the British monarchy. The restored historical protocols, which had initially seemed like arbitrary obstacles to her established role, had become meaningful connections to centuries of tradition and constitutional development. Public perception had evolved significantly during the transition period. Initial confusion and sympathy had developed into genuine respect for Camilla's graceful acceptance of difficult changes in service of constitutional accuracy. Her willingness to adapt personal preferences to institutional requirements had demonstrated a level of dedication that resonated with citizens who valued both tradition and personal sacrifice for the common good. The charitable organizations she supported had successfully navigated the adjustments required by the restored constitutional framework. Many charity leaders expressed that their relationships with Camilla had actually strengthened during the transition, as her commitment to their causes had proven more important than formal titles or ceremonial positions. Her dedication to meaningful service had transcended the complexities of constitutional protocol. International recognition of the British monarchy's commitment to historical accuracy had enhanced its reputation among constitutional scholars and fellow monarchies worldwide. The thorough research process and careful implementation of ancient protocols had been studied and praised by experts in constitutional law and royal history across multiple countries. Professor Whitfield's research had been published in academic journals and formed the basis for similar constitutional reviews in other monarchies. His discovery of overlooked historical documents and protocols had contributed significantly to scholarly understanding of how constitutional monarchy had evolved over centuries while maintaining its essential traditional foundations. The palace staff had adapted remarkably well to the restored historical framework. Initial confusion had given way to pride in maintaining authentic traditions that connected their daily work to centuries of royal service. Many staff members expressed that understanding. The historical reasoning behind various protocols had made their work more meaningful and purposeful. Charles had watched his wife's transformation with deep admiration and growing love. Her resilience in facing unexpected challenges and her commitment to institutional service above personal convenience had strengthened their relationship and deepened his respect for her character. The crisis had revealed qualities of strength and adaptability that impressed everyone who witnessed her journey. The restored constitutional framework had actually simplified certain aspects of royal protocol by providing clear historical precedents for complex ceremonial questions. Ancient traditions that had seemed obsolete proved to contain practical wisdom about managing the delicate balance between royal dignity and public accessibility that remained relevant in contemporary society. Camilla's public speaking had evolved to incorporate historical knowledge gained during the transition process. She could now explain the constitutional reasoning behind various royal traditions with authority and genuine understanding, making her a more effective ambassador for the monarchy's role in British society and government. The experience had also strengthened her relationships with other members of the royal family. Shared challenges in adapting to the restored protocols had created deeper bonds of mutual support and understanding. The constitutional changes had affected multiple family members, creating opportunities for collaboration and shared learning that enhanced family unity. Religious leaders had praised the monarchy's commitment to historical accuracy and constitutional integrity. The Archbishop of Canterbury noted that the restoration of ancient protocols had actually strengthened the relationship between the monarchy and the established church by clarifying traditional roles and responsibilities that had become confused over recent decades. Media coverage had gradually shifted from sensationalism about the personal impact of the changes to appreciation for the institutional dedication they represented. Royal correspondents developed deeper expertise in constitutional history and traditional protocol, leading to more informed and nuanced reporting about the monarchy's role in contemporary British society. The educational initiatives launched during the transition had succeeded in helping the public understand the constitutional foundations of the monarchy. Increased awareness of historical traditions and their contemporary relevance had actually strengthened public support for the institution by demonstrating its deep roots in British history and law. As winter approached, Camilla found herself looking forward to the annual cycle of royal duties with renewed purpose and understanding. The restored constitutional framework had provided clearer guidance for her role and responsibilities, eliminating much of the uncertainty that had sometimes characterized her position in the past. Her personal growth during this challenging period had surprised even those closest to her. The woman who had initially been overwhelmed by unexpected constitutional changes had developed into a confident advocate for historical tradition and institutional integrity. The transformation had been difficult but ultimately strengthening. The anniversary of the announcement approached with mixed emotions. Camilla could remember vividly the shock and distress of that morning when everything seemed to change without warning. However, she could also appreciate how much she had learned and grown through the process of adapting to ancient traditions that had initially seemed foreign and difficult. In quiet moments, she reflected on the broader lessons of her experience, the importance of institutional service over personal preference, the value of historical continuity in providing stability and meaning, and the strength that could be found in accepting necessary changes with dignity and grace. The evening before the anniversary, Charles found her in their private sitting room, reading through some of Professor Whitfield's historical documents that had started this entire journey. She looked up as he entered, and he was struck by the peace in her expression, so different from the distress he had witnessed exactly 1 year earlier. "I never thought I would say this," Camilla said softly, "but I'm grateful for what happened, not for the pain of it, but for what it taught me about myself and about service." She gestured to the ancient documents spread before her. "These traditions aren't just old rules. They're the foundation of everything we represent." Charles sat beside her, taking her hand as he had done so many times during the difficult transition. "You've shown extraordinary grace throughout this entire process," he said. "The way you've embraced these changes while maintaining your commitment to service has been remarkable to witness." The next morning brought media attention as the anniversary of the announcement arrived. However, the coverage was markedly different from the intense scrutiny of a year earlier. Journalists now wrote with deeper understanding of the constitutional issues involved and genuine respect for how Camilla had navigated the challenges. Several prominent constitutional scholars published articles praising the monarchy's commitment to historical accuracy and noting how the transition had been managed with exceptional sensitivity to both institutional requirements and human concerns. The process had become a model for how traditional institutions could adapt to constitutional necessities while maintaining public confidence. Camilla's charitable partners organized a special celebration recognizing her continued dedication to their causes throughout the challenging transition period. Representatives from dozens of organizations expressed how her unwavering commitment had actually strengthened their relationships with the royal family despite the constitutional complexities they had all needed to navigate. The day concluded with a private family dinner where Camilla was surrounded by relatives who had supported her throughout the difficult year. The conversation was warm and celebratory, focusing on achievements and growth rather than dwelling on past difficulties. The family had emerged stronger and more united through the shared experience of constitutional change. As she prepared for bed that night, Camilla looked at herself in the mirror and saw someone different from the woman who had first read that shocking letter 12 months earlier. The changes had been profound, extending far beyond titles and protocols to touch the very core of her understanding of duty, service, and personal strength. The tears that had marked the beginning of this journey had been replaced by quiet confidence and deep satisfaction in serving according to ancient traditions that connected her to centuries of royal history. She had discovered that adaptation to constitutional requirements could be a source of strength rather than limitation, and that embracing historical tradition could enhance rather than restrict her ability to serve effectively. The palace announcement that had once seemed like a devastating disruption had ultimately become the catalyst for personal growth and deeper institutional understanding that would benefit both Camilla and the monarchy for years to come. The stunning news that had left her in tears had transformed into a foundation for renewed purpose and strengthened service to the British people.